allegiance, and then we'll have our invocation by Councilmember Neese. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Father God, thank you for providing another day in which we can come here and serve you and seek your wisdom for this city. As we serve, I ask that your blessing of peace and grace and mercy and comfort to be upon us as a light to our community for your glory. Father, we pray for the wellness and safety of the men and women who are out there on the streets serving. They're here to protect the city, those that are protecting the county and our state. We thank you, Father, for those that volunteer to serve in the nation, both here and abroad. And we ask these things all in your glorious name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Tony, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Shaw? Here. Gulick?
Here.
Neese?
Here.
Owen?
Here.
Joy?
Present.
Chiriki?
I'm here.
Tidswell?
Here.
Purinton? Boyette? Here. Rupsis? Here. Mayor Cole?
Here. We do not have minutes for approval tonight. Those are pending for our next meeting. We do probably have some courtesies, though, tonight. Councilmember Joy, I know you had one.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would like to have Elise Monette come up for courtesy, and also Terry Porta. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us tonight. We are here to introduce the artist in residence that we are contracting with for this year, Terry Porta. As we've mentioned to you before, this is through a project we're calling Mobilize the Magic City, and it was funded through a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and also we're getting in local matching fund donations. So that's how it's funded. I know we've spoken to you about this project several times, but part of what Terry will be tasked with is implementing 2 creative placemaking hubs along our neighborhood bikeway, which runs from about North Park to Rhodes Park. Implementing a placemaking playbook where we'll document all of the processes used to do our creative placemaking, and then also conducting a public arts committee feasibility study with the goal of hopefully having a public arts committee that can help say, yes, this is an appropriate public art piece, no, this isn't, and just make the process really clear and easy for both artists and residents. So with that, I'll just let Terry introduce herself briefly, and there we go.
Hi, and thank you, everybody. It's exciting for me to be here. I am just graduated from Montana State University Billings with my Bachelor of Fine Art, and I've worked obviously in town on artist projects. One that you may have heard of or know is the City Hall parking garage, which is Park 3, and I really learned to get to know and connect with the community through that project in such a way that it really caused me to want to be more active in the community and see Billings from the inside out in a way that I'd never done. And since then, I've done 4 more projects, 2 others that I'll talk about. One is on the Montana State University Billings Gymnasium. They have 2 other of my murals inside of their community in the residence halls. But then also down at the Northern Plains Resource Council, we did a wonderful little sound wall, hopefully that helped them with getting traffic noise off their patio. So I had a lot of great projects that I've worked with around town. I've seen a lot of you around town, and I just want to thank you all for the hard work you do here on the council. So thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Any questions, I suppose?
We'll look forward to some great things. Does anybody have any questions for Terry? No, I don't look like.
Thank you.
Okay, other council courtesies this evening? Any other council courtesies? Okay, we'll move on then. We do have a proclamation this evening in recognition of Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, and it reads as follows. Whereas colorectal cancer is the 2nd leading cause of cancer deaths in the United States among men and women combined, And whereas even though colorectal cancer is one of the few cancers that can be prevented with timely screening, 1 in 3 eligible Americans are not up to date on screening. And whereas it's estimated that by 2030, colorectal cancer will be the #1 cancer killer for those ages 20 through 49. And whereas Black Americans are 20% more likely to be diagnosed with colorectal cancer and about 40% more likely to die from the disease than other groups. And whereas colorectal cancer is expected to account for 11% of cancer deaths among Hispanic men and 9% of cancer deaths for Hispanic women. And whereas colonoscopy screening rates still have not returned to pre-COVID-19 levels. And whereas the national goal established by the National Colorectal Cancer Roundtable is to strive to increase timely colorectal cancer screening rates to 80% in every community for all Americans eligible for screening. And whereas observing Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month during March of every year provides a special opportunity to increase awareness and offer education on the importance of early detection and screening of colorectal cancer. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby declare March 2023 as Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month in Billings and encourage all citizens to get screened for this disease, which can often be treated when detected early or prevented altogether. Those are that's our proclamation for this evening. Council reports. Council Member Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give the Council a little update on the Local Affairs Council Subcommittee. Last month, we met and had a presentation. Really, Director Friday and Scott Walker really talked more deeply about the land uses and zoning and development that's going on in the Lockwood area and along Mary Street. This was really just an opportunity for the Local Affairs Subcommittee to get a deeper knowledge of the issues, land use, and some of the development that we anticipate will be multi-jurisdictional in the sense that this is really development along the city and the county on that hard edge. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other reports? Councilmember Tricky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. 2 real quick updates. The bill that was in front of the House in order to try to reverse the ban on the use of traffic cameras in order to issue tickets and for like running red lights and stuff like that died in committee. We were surprised that it actually got up and going. We weren't expecting it this year. I do say that one thing that the group that was working on it learned in this process is that it is currently legal to use traffic cameras for just about every other law enforcement thing that's out there, including tracking people, facial recognition, and all of that stuff. So the only group of people who are protected from these cameras are people who are breaking traffic laws. The other thing that I wanted to mention just real quickly is that Zonta and the Billings Area Family Violence Task Force and Riverstone Health met earlier today, and they are coming up with a plan to reboot the task force. Their major goal in existing is to provide education around family violence, domestic violence, that whole thing as a means of trying to stop that whole cycle of violence from going on. So there's a group in place where there's now a whole bunch of more volunteers that are ready to dive into that, and I hope we'll see some action on that front in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council reports? Don't see any, so we'll ask our city administrator. Chris, do you have anything for us this evening?
Mayor and Council, a few things. So first off, item 1, there's 2 items that will need to be separated from the consent, 1Q and 1T. So 1Q, questions there regarding Brewington Drive. And then the second one, 1T, requires a supermajority vote because there was a valid protest on that zone change. So if you could separate those at the appropriate time. Then the last item I have
is that there is one ex parte item placed in the notebook at the back of the council chambers. It was sent to the mayor and council after 3 o'clock this afternoon. And that is all that I have, Mayor, council.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We'll move along then to public comment on non-public hearing agenda items. So for anybody who's here with us tonight, that's item 1, the consent agenda with all those subparts. Everything else will have a public hearing later, but if you came and you're interested and you wanted to comment on anything on the consent agenda, item number 1, now is the time. Just ask that you come to the podium and tell us your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Christy Drake. I reside at 2950 Walden Place, and I'm here on behalf of Billings TrailNet and our Board of Directors to proudly present the City of Billings with a $10,000 check for the Fifth Avenue Corridor study for the 30% design. This brings Billings TrailNet's contributions to the city for trail and bikeway and amenities up to $767,000. So we're excited about the Fifth Avenue corridor, what it means for Billings with a walkable, bikeable, vibrant downtown. Really could revitalize our downtown area. So with that, would Ms. DeRay like to come and receive the check? She just happened to be in the audience, so I made her come and
Great, thank you very much.
all right.
You got to turn around and pose. You've got some people who wanted, Jennifer, you're supposed to pose for this picture. There you go. And that's one of those real checks, not one of the giant things. You can actually cash that one.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christy, and thank you, TrailNet. We look forward to seeing that project move along. Thank you. Next, further comment on anything under item 1, the consent agenda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Harrison, and I am returning to speak in regards to, this evening it's being referred to as Agenda Letter T, in regards to zone change 1021. And I just wanted to once again reiterate and reinforce my support for the zone change in regards to providing more workforce housing. You all heard last time, my arguments as to why I would favor this project going forward, even though I admit I don't live in that immediate area. So no, it wouldn't affect me on the day-to-day as far as traffic and all of that stuff goes. But it is part of my city and our city, and so it does still affect all of us. I like to explore all of Billings and see what's going around the whole town. So I utilize every corner of Billings, and I think of it all as mine, even if I don't see the traffic every single day going back and forth. I know 3 people close to me who are working professionals, wonderful people, dynamic people, people I think we would all want to keep in this community, and they are having a really hard time finding housing. They're not at the point in their lives where they're ready to purchase a house. They can't afford to, or whatever their, personal reasons are, that they can't be searching for a permanent home to buy, so they need rentals. They make decent money. They can afford, probably a higher range of pricing for rentals, which is, I think, great for them. But they can't find anything that suits their needs. And 2 of them are staying at my house right now. Which I'm happy to have them, but I know they really want to find their own place. So again, I just want to voice my support for this project, and I think it would benefit all of us if more housing was available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melissa Smith. I live at 1335 Naval Street up in the Heights. I'm here in support of item 1T, like previously mentioned, especially because even though I currently live at the opposite end of the city, this housing opportunity very much affects me and my family. Some of you have heard my story before. I have lived all around the United States, in towns smaller than 500, in cities of millions, in every kind of housing. And the thing that I can assure everyone here, despite any concerns for safety or how this kind of a housing development or living space might be different than what we're used to in a housing suburb, people make community wherever they are. And it is very much as strong as any other place where people live together. For the record, I've lived in Billings the longest. This is my favorite. I haven't in all of this time envisioned living anywhere else, honestly. This is the place that I wanted to spend the rest of my life. Which brings me back to why I'm here again, to hope to, I hope to sway you in favor of this proposal. My kids are nearly grown. My oldest is determined to move out within a year. Finding work is not a problem, but finding a place to rent is. And my family is left with a choice. If my kids cannot find a place to live here, they'll move. And wherever my kids go, I'm probably going to follow my husband too. So as much as I love Billings, have loved raising my family here, love working here and running my business here, if my kids leave Billings, I have to go with them. So the last thing I want to leave with you is, as a project manager, and I mentioned this last time too, I want to thank every one of you for your thoughtful questions and concerns. I see how your questions and the community feedback has made this project better. A good solution for Billings. While there's always room for improvement, this project will help to solve the problem of where to live for hundreds of families in Billings. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next. And please make a little line if there's anybody else, just so I don't shut you off prematurely. Go ahead.
Sorry, so my name is Bailey Desper. I live at 540 Sudan up in the Heights. I'm here to comment on the topic T, section 1 for the affordable housing regarding the zoning of the multi-housing complex. I have here today a notice of an applicant status regarding a waiting list for Ponderosa Acres and a couple other rental agencies around town. That the reason why I brought these in is that, you know, with the new building of this multifamily subdivision out on the west end, it would create more housing to open up the housing that currently is being used for like Section 8 or affordable housing to, you know, hopefully grow within the community. I have recently been homeless, and I too cannot afford to find a place right now with the rat race that's going on. For every one apartment, there's probably at least another 10, 20 applicants trying to apply for that one apartment. So I roommate with another roommate up in the Heights. Is it ideal? No. I would love to be able to rent my own home, but I can't afford it because there's nothing that's within my budget or that's out there in the market right now that's available. So I do ask the City Council and our mayor to please pass the zoning request for this new affordable housing.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna Holleb. I live at 2924 Ronan Drive in Ward 4. I'm also here to speak on item 1T, the zone change for 1021. I was contemplating my purpose here tonight, and partly it's to speak for folks like me who became a first-time homebuyer when they moved to Billings. Moved to Billings 7 years ago. As we know, 7 years is a lifetime in the world of mortgage lending right now, or home prices in Billings. I'm thankful that my property value has gone up, but if I were to need to move, I couldn't afford a home in Billings right now. I couldn't afford to rent the same size space that I'm in, or even a little bit smaller. I would have to leave Billings. I do communications and social media work for a business on the far west end, and they're not going to have 2 seasonal workers come back who are trained, who are great workers, because they literally couldn't find a place to live in Billings. They couldn't find a rental. Having this kind of great workforce housing on the west end helps people like me keep jobs helping businesses. It helps people who want to work jobs on the West End, and it is an amazingly appropriate location with this zoning change for an area that has great public transit, great walkability, great access to the fastest growing developments in Billings. And I hope that you will continue to support this zoning change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josh Kostelecki. I'm at 140 Wyoming Avenue. I'm here in support of 1T, the zoning change. The things I'd kind of like to bring up is I have 3 friends who are no longer in Billings, Montana, which also means them and their families are no longer spending money in Billings, Montana. And they call it affordable housing. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word affordable, they think cheap. Well, it's not cheap, it's just affordable. So, and when people are more comfortable, they spend more money in businesses, which also helps the town of Billings flourish. One of these friends has moved out of state, and the other 2 are in state, but they are, again, no longer in Billings. I think workforce housing or affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, is very much needed in Billings to keep people here. I mean, people right now are picky where they live, and everybody wants to be comfortable. So it's a win-win for everybody. I think we just need to get more zoning in this town that will allow for affordable housing so people can get to and from work. Whereas if their car breaks down, they can actually walk to work and they can still make money to repair that car, and then they can make more than just money to spend on their housing, so they can spend it elsewhere and actually help the town of Billings flourish. So that's all I got for you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Steve Byer, and I live at 2527 Louise Lane. I've lived here for 7 years. I moved here from out of state following my son, who moved here to start his career, raise his family, and buy his first home. I followed him and lived with him for a while and rented for 3 years in order to buy my 5th home. And we are both very happy here. And the item, it was brought up, you know, there is some concern about the difference between workforce and low-income housing. And I think workforce housing is important. I think Billings is asked to carry the weight of a lot of, let's say, lower-income people from throughout the state. And I think it's important that we have infrastructure to support higher-income people who will also have housing in the state. I also think that the West Side and the Shiloh corridor is not only a bad place for the new property, it's actually the ideal place because it has room for the traffic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Regarding to Brewington subdivision on the drainage on the street from Wicks Lane down Brewington Drive, there's over a 7-foot drop. Just a block and a half down, there's over a 7-foot drop. And back in '78, I had 2.5 feet of water above my garage door. And I'm concerned, I've got pictures, if you'd like to pass them around, showing the water and that it comes down the street and the block, the culvert I've got built up there, you'll see a level going across. And that's level, and that's over about 12 inches higher than the center of the road. I have that culvert built. And when we get flooded, so to say, that water is just 1.5 inches from coming over. And so I'm concerned with the drainage on this, and along with for speed and that, I'd like hopefully see that they could put some rather divots in instead of bumps, because a divot slows you down more, too. But on the water, there's my main concern. I don't know how far they're putting the drainage apart, and I have not been told whether sidewalks on both sides. I was told once on one side, but I don't know, and same with the drainage. If it's just one side, if there's one sidewalk, or how that goes. So.
Okay, thank you,
Yes.
sir. Looks like we have a question for you. And Chris, can we make sure that these photos get to our engineering staff? Can we pass that back to, I'm sure they'll want to take a look at it. Councilor Tricky, do you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't catch the address. Where is this at?
Off of Wicks and Brewington Drive, about the 1100 block of Wicks Lane, just before Hawthorne Lane.
And Jim, what's your address?
1718, it's a duplex, and I live on 1720. And in those pictures, you'll see the culvert, and that's my place there with the trailer and that. So.
Okay, thank you. We have several items that involve Burlington on the consent agenda tonight, so I'm sure we'll ask our, fortunately, we've got our city engineer with us tonight, and we'll get educated, hopefully. Thank you. Next.
Mayor and council members. My name is Virginia Duke, 239 Avenue F. I'm speaking in favor of 1T, the annexation and zone change. I was a renter for all of my 20s. During that time, I was a college student, then I was a middle school math teacher, and then I was and remain a nonprofit professional. And part of that time as a renter, I was a single earner while my husband went to graduate school. During that time, my husband and I relied on what we would call market rate rental housing in the places that we've lived. There are a lot of folks like me here in Billings, people who are the median household income. And we need more housing in Billings for people like me, like these people. And I ask, is the median household income more prosperous when they are forced to spend more than half their income on housing, which is the current case for a lot of folks? I would argue no. I was not more prosperous when I lived in expensive areas and was forced to pay over 30%. Would they be more? I believe that we, as a city, and these folks would be more prosperous having the choice that would allow them to spend the recommended 30% or less on their rental housing during this time in their lives. In addition to asking you to support this annexation and the zone change, I do ask that you still deny the variance as was done last time. Most people last time were skeptical about walkability in the area. Charlotte roundabouts are bad, they're dangerous. But that's not a permanent condition that we should design our city around. And this project is within a walking distance of a lot of economic activity, and we should build our network connectivity to allow folks that would live in this area to walk to that economic area, those economic areas. I do ask again that we take our responsibility seriously to make sure that that connectivity is safe for the surrounding homes, and that we have measures in place to slow the speed of traffic, because as we know, it's not the speed that's dangerous, it's not the volume that's dangerous, it's the speed. So I ask that we do ensure that as we deny this variance and ensure that there's connectivity, that those streets have slow speeds. That's it. I ask you to please pass this annexation and zone change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. I'm also here in support of the zone change. I don't want to be redundant, so I agree with what most people have said. I do want to point out that.
And your name and address.
Jenna Martin, I'm at 1822 Lost Creek in Billings. I do want to reiterate what some of the things Councilwoman Joy brought up, some really great points about how last time this wasn't we do have a supply and demand issue, and this does help address some of that supply and demand. Councilwoman Owen, you brought up a really great point about the fact that we have kids in foster care right now that cannot be reunited with their families because their families cannot find adequate housing. They are on wait lists for that. So I think this issue goes far deeper and it's far more critical than a simple, maybe there's a bit of higher volume of traffic in front of the house. We have some serious issues in Billings that this really could address. I also would ask to deny the variance. Councilman Neese brought up some really great points about that last time. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, any other public comment on item 1, the consent agenda? No one is standing up, so we'll close public comment period. Move on to the consent agenda. I'll ask for separations. We do know that we do need to separate item 1T, so I will do that. And are there others? Councilmember Owen?
May I just ask a question on that? Is it wise or advisable to also separate then A3 and do them together as a package?
A3 is Brewington, but I'm focused on the Shiloh zone change.
I apologize.
Yep.
I'm on Q. So 1Q and A3 for me, please, Mayor.
Yes, 1Q, resolution ordering improvements for Brewington, and the other one was 3? 1A3.
Because I believe that was also advised that it had to be removed.
Okay, so those are both separated. Councilmember Purington.
I'd like to separate 1O.
Item 1O, resolution approving capital improvement plan for transportation, parks, and rec. Okay, any other separations? Councilmember Ipsis.
Yes, Mayor, I need to separate 1W1 so that I can abstain from that.
Very good. 1W1, bills for the week of January 17, 2023. Anything else? Councilmember? No. Okay, so we'll move on to the non-separated items. Is there a motion? Councilmember Gulick.
Thank you. I move to approve the items on the consent agenda as submitted with the exception of items 1A3, 1O, 1Q, 1T, and 1W1.
Very good. Is there a second? Councilmember Neese? Any discussion? Okay, if in favor of the motion for Councilmember Neese, you had a question or discussion?
Just a comment on the, we already heard from the parks and their donation, but also we also see another donation here to the police department. And we mentioned this a little while ago, but again, it's here for the shields for the police for the body armor. So I really appreciate the community supporting the police like they are and that. So thank you again very much for helping out with that.
Yeah, and thanks for calling our attention to that. And if anybody's interested in contributing to the purchase of those ballistic vests, because they're about $2,400 each, please reach out to Shield 616, a nonprofit that makes those contributions. We thank the Brosovich Family Foundation, the Buchanan Family Foundation, who've picked up most of the tab on those. You can also always contact the Billings Police Department. We can connect you as well, or myself. Thank you very much. Was there another hand down here for anything further? Okay, very good. All right, we'll move to a vote on the non-separated items. If in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
And if opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. First separated item, we'll just try to do these as a package then. Item 1A3 involving Brewington Drive and 1Q Brewington Drive. Councilmember Owen, do you want to frame that or kick that off in any way?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. Excuse me. So I requested these be separated for the purpose of being recorded as a no vote on these items. I appreciate the effort of the Public Works Department to try to find a solution in this area. I just still have policy misgivings about the way we're approaching this here. And we're looking at levying a $1,000 to a $2,000 annual increase for 15 years on people's mortgages. That's a significant cost for people who are often on fixed incomes, for people whose wages are not rising as fast as our need to address infrastructure. And I'm just concerned that the underlying policy is inadequate. We're going to see more and more neighborhoods who are being stressed by bearing the burden of this. And the question in my mind is not sidewalks or not sidewalks. Even without sidewalks, it's still a significant cost for people who don't have as much income flexibility or elasticity as the need for infrastructure is. So I understand this frustrates some council members, and I respect that. The Public Works Department has undeniably complied with previously established policy. I don't think there's any dispute there. I just am questioning the value of the underlying policy, and so I wish to be recorded as a no vote on these items.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we ask the city engineer to comment on some of the photos that we saw and the drainage issues? I'm not sure that I understood all of those issues. Okay, let's ask Mac if you'd come up. Hopefully you were able to hear Mr. Brewington's comments and saw the photos. Do you have anything that you can tell us about that situation?
Yeah, just a couple points there, Mayor and Council. Thank you. Good evening. So Mr. Brewington has some great points, which we are fully aware of. Brewington Drive, as he notes, slopes from south to north. The good news is it has some grade, so the water can run off. So we're doing a couple things about those concerns. Right now, there's not a good containment within the street, so the water kind of shifts from one side to the other side. There's not good control. So by adding the curb and gutter, we're kind of keeping the water separated to sides, meaning the water amounts on each side is less. The other thing we're doing right now, we're adding a storm drain over to the hauling drain, and we're adding 8 new inlets toward the bottom of the project. Right now, there's 2 small inlets at the north end with Kyle to kind of look at the regional drainage. Specific to Mr. Brewington's property, partly because there's no curb and gutter there, that water tends to wander and come out of the street. The curb and gutter that we will be adding will keep the water within the street. The second point that he brought up were speeds. Obviously, that's always a question. One minor detail in the design, about midway down Brewington Drive with the curb, we're doing a little bulb out there. So whether sidewalks or not are included in the project, we're looking at a little bulb out in the curb. That's a city cost for traffic calming. Be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Gillick.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you explain what are some of the assessments that the residents have to pay when they're not without the sidewalks? I understand they're responsible for the sidewalks, but what are they being charged for in the assessments without the sidewalks?
So in a typical assessment, if under the no sidewalk scenario, there would be the curb and gutter along the frontage. There would be the drive approach, which is the incline up to the curb height, essentially. And then there's a tiny little strip of asphalt associated with the curb and gutter.
Okay, so even though they're not going to have sidewalks, you would put in a full drive approach at each property?
Yeah, and that is the 6-inch rise that matches with the back of curb elevation, and that helps keep the water in the street.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other Councilmember Gillick?
Yes, Mac, is this street not able to be maintained just because of the fundamental design that it's right, doesn't the crown right now? Like I noticed that this street wasn't part of the paver program because, is it a design issue? And if so, is that because it was built before it was in the city, or why is it in this particular condition? Yeah.
Historically, my understanding, I think those were constructed in the county. Brewington subdivision were originally 20,000 square foot lots, I believe, constructed in the county. I don't know that it's a design issue per se. The street has degraded to it's like there's potholes, we can start to chase potholes around. It's a maintenance issue versus it's time for a complete reconstruct. We could go do an overlay, and that would be breaking up in a year or two kind of a thing. So it would be throwing good money after bad there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Purington, Councilmember Rufus?
Just for clarification, It was my understanding, because this is within the Safe Routes to School area, I think it's within a half of a mile. And so the property owners are being assessed for the sidewalks. And that was part of the intent of doing Brewington, or was it already in plans to be put into this program?
Specifically, it's not identified in the Safe Routes program specifically. We kind of looked at, from a planning aspect, that it's logically within that quarter to half mile, and it serves as a connector. So we kept going on that note and got bid costs for actual costs. Then we can make an educated decision on doing that.
So, follow up, Mr. Rich. So
Sure.
it does include the sidewalks. The sidewalks are what the property owners are being assessed.
As proposed, yes.
Okay, Councilor Ripsis, and then Councilor Titzwa.
Thank you, Mayor. Mac, did I read that it's going to be a full 34-foot width, so parking on both sides, enough room for 2 cars down the middle?
Yes.
So the street probably doesn't have that much traffic. I can't imagine that there would ever be, or there would be very rarely, 2 cars parked on each side of the street and 2 cars also trying to pass at the same time. Did we look at alternative designs that might, narrow the street and thus reduce the cost of the construction for the homeowners there? Did we even ask the neighbors if they're willing to give up street parking or look at any kind of design alternatives that would have reduced the cost?
Couple points there with respect there. Actually, we have observed the park. There's a fairly reasonable number of rental properties there, so we have kind of observed that on the weekends. During the weekdays, there are a lot of parking on both sides of the road right now. With respect to the cost, as far as, if we were to change the street width, we're already giving the residents the credit for the street that's there, so the street width does not have any effect on the assessments per se, significantly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve work order 22-21 Brewington Drive reconstruction, recommended Askin Construction, and resolution ordering improvements for work order 22-21 Brewington Drive reconstruction.
So the motion was to approve both together, is that correct?
Yes, because they've been discussed as 2 different things,
Okay.
as one thing.
All right, I'm not sure there's any barrier with that, but we do have to clarify something about 1Q. So the motion at this point.
I can, that's fine. I will make it for the approval of work order 22-21 Brewington Drive reconstruction, recommend Askin Construction only as a motion.
Okay, I was looking at 1Q, and I was thinking the issue was the staff recommended 2 options that included sidewalks. One, all sidewalks, and one, a mix of sidewalks. And it was a little unclear exactly what the staff recommendation was. So that was the issue that I was seeing that needed to be clarified in 1Q. Are you seeing something else?
Yes. I'm making my motion just for the work order, not for Q, but for the.
Oh, I'm sorry, just.
The motion is just
Take them
for-
one at a time. You
Yeah,
just
the
do
motion
one-
is just for the work order, not for
Gotcha.
the Q
Okay.
item.
Okay, so just 1A3.
Just one, yes.
We'll address the other one here in a minute.
Yes.
And just in case there's any doubt, I guess that's the bid award. Legally, on the chance that we were not to approve the actual work order, 1Q, Karen, we're not creating a contract here by approving 1A3 with this bid. I just want to make it crystal clear that unless we move ahead with the other item, there is no contract, and Askin can't come and say we created that contract. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we need a second. Is there a second to the motion for approval of 1A3? Councilmember Chiriqui. Okay. And further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to, Councilmember Nish, you had discussion.
Yeah, it does. And actually, it's a question for Mac. I was going to ask him that before I vote. I want to understand this. Mac, if this work is not done, will the neighbors continue to see flooding in that area?
Yes.
Okay, and I think on some of the cul-de-sacs, I think gotten calls in the cul-de-sacs, they're not paved at all, is that correct? And they have a lot of mud and gravel?
The portions of the cul-de-sacs are paved and portions aren't, and it depends on which one you're looking at.
Okay, and so if we don't do this, it's going to be kind of a mess down there every time it rains and floods and freezes and things like that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you're ready to vote, motion is for approval, item 1A3. If in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passed with the exception of Councilmember Owen voting in opposition. The next separated item, well, let's treat these as a package and jump then to 1Q. Is there a motion or other questions on this? Councilmember Nice?
I'm sorry, I have another question for Mac on this. If I remember correctly, the memo mentioned that or maybe it was just emails to me mentioned that the bid for sidewalks were actually fairly inexpensive compared to what we've seen in the past. Is that true with the rest of the projects and the costs that the residents are being responsible to pay? Is with the bids reasonable, much more reasonable than we've seen in the past?
Yes, this was I'm going to use the word cost-effective bid, and the question probably is why. One of the reasons why is it's packaged with the street project because it's kind of tangential with, doing the curb and rather than a surgical standalone sidewalk project.
Okay, so if we were to see this come to us sometime in the future, sorry, Mayor, for a follow-up question.
Sure.
If we were to see this to come to us in the future, then we would expect to have to pay more, or the residents would have to pay more for doing their sidewalks at that time?
I would anticipate that, yes.
Okay, and Mayor, one more question about this. Sure. I believe there were several sections of sidewalk that the city is responsible for paying that the residents are not paying. And so if I understand, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we move to that vote? Councilmember Denise?
Mayor, I want to just speak in favor of the motion. This is a tough thing when we see, we don't have a motion.
I'm sorry. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 1Q, improvements of the sidewalks on both sides of Brewington Drive.
Very good. And second by Councilmember Gulick. Now, Councilmember Denise, you wanted to provide more detail?
I do. I'm glad the Public Works identified this within a walking area of there. I'm surprised it wasn't on Safe Routes to School, and I think these are the type of areas that I think that the city needs to look at and say, we need to provide safe routes to schools for our kids as they walk through here. I know they didn't see a lot of kids walking through here, but maybe now when they have sidewalks in, they may see even more. This has been a problem area with the flooding over time. It's always better and cheaper to build now than later. I know this is rather expensive for some of these property owners, but I think in the long run, this is going to pay off for them not having to have these streets that are going to be full of water and things like that. So I would urge you to vote to support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to again urge my colleagues, whether you vote for this or not, to open up a discussion about the underlying policy here. Just recently, voters approved a very significant public safety mill levy that added about $200 to an average home. We are potentially looking at park solutions that are hundreds of dollars per year as well. And now here, a neighborhood that will look at $1,000 to $2,000 a year. It doesn't matter if you support them, if you can't afford it. And I think that's the thing that we have to wrestle with is there a better way to do it? I think it is the case that in this particular neighborhood, there are neighbors who are for it. There are neighbors who are against it. This is not a neighborhood unified against this by any means. But there are people who risk losing their home because of this decision tonight. And we've made similar decisions around the community where even though there is merit to it, there are engineering issues, there are flooding issues, there are safe routes to school issues. We can believe in all those things and still acknowledge that there are people who cannot afford this decision that will be made tonight. And I think we have an underlying policy issue that somehow we have to wrestle with. How do we address our infrastructure needs equitably around this community, fairly around this community, and in a way that we're not driving people out of their homes? And so that's my concern tonight and why I'm asking to be recorded as a no.
Okay, thank you. That does raise a question for me. I just want to make sure we got the numbers right, and this might be something for either Mac or Jennifer DeRay. Just interested in how much the total assessments are that the neighbors are paying compared to the total cost of the project, with the difference being what I'm paying, I guess, so to speak. The assessments are $535,000, and the total project cost is $1,444,000, and I see some thumbs up back there. So just kind of the facts there would be then that the neighbors are paying a little more than a third of the cost, probably high 30s in percentage terms. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. The motion is for approval, item 1Q. If in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes, exception of Councilmember Owen voting in the opposition. Our next item that was separated is item 1O, resolution involving the capital improvement plan for transportation and parks and rec. Councilmember Purington, that was your separation. Would you like to lead us off?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason I was separating this is because with different issues with transportation versus parks and recreation, so with them having this much, carrying this much weight, if we could separate the vote. I believe that we can do that.
Okay, so you would have a separate vote on the parks component and a separate vote on the transportation component?
Yes.
Okay. I think we actually have something in our bylaws that talks about a right to separate. I'm not sure of the details of that, but I don't personally have any objection to that. Does anybody have any basis for not doing that?
No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll do that. Do you have a preference as to which one we address first?
Since it's first in line, I guess we can do transportation.
Okay. Then what'll be before you is the transportation CIP. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve the transportation part of the CIP.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Joy, second by Councilmember Neese for approval of the transportation CIP. Discussion. Is there any discussion before we move to a vote? Okay, Councilmember Purington.
I think one of my main things with the CIP was there was money going towards for 2024 for the Fifth Avenue corridor, and it's for the design plan. It's my understanding it's for the design plan, and yet there is nothing, no movement on that beyond, the next 5 years. So, and then also, I'm going to stand firm on the two-way conversion. I just got a letter today that said one property owner down there, business owner, says they're absolutely, he hasn't heard one person say they like it. So I'm just going to stand my ground on that one. So I will be voting no on it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Well, if I could condition this to say no back in parking with this approval, I would. Are you going to second that motion? Okay. I'm going to amend the motion with no two-way parking during the conversion.
No back in.
No back in parking for the two-way conversion. And that's my amendment, and I see someone seconding that.
I guess sort of a point of order, I guess. This is like a capital improvement plan.
Okay.
Is that the level of granularity?
I'll withdraw
but
my motion.
Your point is noted.
That's what I just wanted to do. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so still the motion is for approval of the transportation CIP. Any further discussion? Okay, if in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes, but with the exception of council members Tidswell and Purington voting in, and Boyette voting in opposition. Okay, thank you very much. Now, the Parks CIP. Is there a motion or questions? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I move to approve the Parks CIP.
Second.
Councilmember Shaw and Joy made the second. It's been made and seconded. Is there anything in the way of discussion before we proceed to a vote? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's a lot that we talked about this before. I just want to make sure the public is aware of this CIP, and a lot of it, and it will change. We've got a lot of ongoing good meetings led by Councilmember Rupsis as far as some of these, what's going in the parks. And then we also have, I think we'll be planning on talking more about this during the council retreat. So I think a lot of this is really a living document and approval of the CIP, and I think this will shake out in the next couple of months. So I'll support this as presented now, but expecting to see changes on it in the future.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington.
Well, I'll just mention now, Jennifer, I can really relate to what you're saying about the assessments and property taxes going up for different things. And the way this is laid out right now in the CIP, I think the assessments and the property taxes that people will see in the city will go up exponentially with what's planned right now. I understand, Roy, that it's not, it's not solid right now, but at this point, I can't approve. I won't vote for this.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I just want to clarify for anybody listening that this document is not council approving additional funding for anything. In fact, we don't have the authority to levy millions of dollars without a public vote. So Park District 1, which is the tool we have right now, is going to be going away. And so it will be up to the voters to decide what this looks like, not council as a body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval, the Parks CIP. If in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition from council members Owen and Purington and Boyette. Okay, so motion passes. And then our next separation would be item 1T. That is the zone change 1021 south of Bell Avenue. We needed to separate that because it requires a supermajority to be approved. And when first reading happened, and we spent 3.5 hours on that one, so you probably remember that. The zone change passed 6 in favor and 3 against, meaning it had just narrowly the 2/3 majority. But two council members, Tricky and Tidswell, were not with us that evening, so this is second reading. And we still have the supermajority requirement. So with 11 of us, there would need to be 8 votes in favor to get to 2/3. I just want to frame that, and we'll kick it back to the council. Just so we have a motion on the floor. I voted in favor. So, and the variance is not part of this because the variance died last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. And there's no requirement of a second reading on the variance. So this is only on the zone change. I've voted for the zone change, so I'll make the motion for approval of item 1T. Is there a second? Second by Council Member Chiriky. Now, discussion to whomever. Is there any discussion? Council Member Chiriky.
I just really want to emphasize that if we're going to continue to not accept higher density buildings in our zone changes. I really want the people who are against it to sit down and figure out what exactly will they accept in this thing. It is a total disservice to our community and to our development and to our developers to leave them hanging on believing that something is possible, putting their time and energy into it, and then running into a council that knows that they don't like it, but we need to be able to articulate why we like it so we can change the zoning so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gulick and Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. I will be voting in support of the amendment or the motion. Probably it's not a perfect development for any of us for any particular reason, but we can't let the perfect be. We can't allow the the good.
Yeah, we know what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. Perfect be the enemy of the good. There we go. That's what I was looking for. We have to move in a direction where there is a need for housing, especially with a lot of the hospital, St. Vincent opened a clinic there, the medical school. Some of us would like to have maybe some commercial, something that just service the people living in there. I think that would be nice too, but there's no way that a developer can anticipate what all of us would want to have in advance. And so I guess I would just urge us all, I think this is a development that moves us in the right direction towards housing that helps across the whole board in terms of our housing needs, because it just makes more housing available. So I will be voting in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we all missed the point 2 weeks ago. This wasn't against the housing. Everybody thinks it's against the housing. The housing was great. I think it was, the problem was I voted against it because I didn't want the traffic on Bell Avenue and Obie. That was my objection. And the applicant even agreed. He came to the council, to the zoning commission with a variance that said, will not go into these neighborhoods. And that's what he came to us because that's what he heard people wanted. And we voted it down. So my concern is not I like what they're doing. They have a nice park in the middle. They heard us. They brought in some mom and dads, drag their kids. They don't have to go 4 miles to a park. They can go right next door. The development, I think, is wonderful. I like his idea of having both streets go out onto Vista Avenue rather than through these little streets. That's why I voted against it. To me, that's the issue, not the housing itself.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I expect this is going to probably pass, and so I think there'll be enough to support this, but I'm not going to change my vote at this time. I think that the idea that we look at this is, I think it is needed housing, and so I would like to see this project developed. However, as I stated before, I think the idea of us not having, whether it's perfect type of a development or not, I think the idea is we have to be able to produce a type of housing that we're going to live with for 50, 100 years from now. Going through legislator is actually a plan that would, if it does go through, we would have to decide how we're going to zone all the land within the city of Billings. If I had that choice today and we were looking at this area and it hadn't come to us for a request, I would have thought we would put commercial along a collector street like this. And we would have probably made this zone change years ago and then have housing next to that. So you have walkable commercial businesses near where your housing is, not a mile away where you have to cross a very busy road to get down to the Shiloh shopping area down there. And so I think when we look at, if it's not perfect, I think we're going to hinder ourselves down the road by allowing this type of development to go. So I am going to vote no. I think it will pass, but hopefully it'll send a message to developers that we really do need to, when they're building large developers, they don't have to build a commercial. They can just set aside that land for later on in the future when a commercial developer would like to come in there, build that, and then put that commercial development in there for those residents at the time when the capacity they feel needs to get there. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Before we proceed to a vote, and we'll have a hand vote on this. Are we ready to vote? Okay, so the motion was for approval of item 1T, the zone change. If in favor of the motion for approval, please raise your hand. Voting in favor are Council Members Shaw, Gulick, Owen, Joy, Cole, Chiriki, and Purington. If voting in opposition, please raise your hand. Voting in opposition are Council Members Neese, Tidswell, Boyette, and Rupsis. The motion fails, and the zone change fails. So that concludes item 1T. Item 1W1 is Councilman Rupsis will be abstaining on that one. So I'll make the motion to approve the item 1W1 bills for the week of January 17. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Joy. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. If in favor of approval of item 1W1, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes with Councilmember Rupsis abstaining. That brings us then to our regular agenda and first item number 2. And Tony, would you read item number 2?
Item number 2, public hearing and resolution assessing nuisance property abatements. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Our presenter this evening is our finance director, Andy Zeller. Or the nuisance property assessments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The two properties I have for you tonight are ones that we have conducted abatements on, but the invoices have not been paid. So in order to recoup that money back into, that taxpayer money back, I'm asking that you would approve these assessments. The first one is on Windmill Circle. As you can see, there's a before and after picture. The second one is an abatement we did at Dorothy Lane. That one, there has been some payments that have been made after you received your packet. So I believe Andy's gonna handle that portion for me. But the actual assessment would be $1,056.80. Another $100 came in on that one. So that's the two nuisance properties that I have for you.
Okay. Questions for Tina? What's that? Yeah.
You can applaud at the end. What?
No, it doesn't look like it.
No, I need that one still for the next.
Okay.
I combined all of my nuisance stuff into one PowerPoint, so I also have the weed report for you.
Which we'll get to next.
Right.
Okay. A motion if no questions?
Public hearing.
Or I'm sorry, appreciate it. Yes. We do need to have a public hearing on this item. So is there any public comment on item 2, the nuisance assessments? Please come forward if there is. No one is coming forward, so we will close the public hearing. And Andy, you wanted to chime in.
I'd like to add one comment before you make a motion, that you consider just authorizing staff to adjust the assessments accordingly based upon the payments that have been received. As Tina indicated, there have been some payments received. And we may still get one tomorrow, but we want to have that flexibility.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Councilmember Joy, you were ready to make the motion, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution assessing nuisance property abatements as recommended by staff and as amended by the Director of Finance based on later payments.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shaw. Any discussion? Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Deese?
I guess my only question is, and whoever can answer, how long, I mean, do you set up a separate payment plan for some of these folks if they said, well, I want to pay it off? Do you set that up?
No, there's an invoice sent, and then if it's not paid in full, then we assess it. And what we're trying to do is assess them in a more than twice a year, so that should that property change hands, the city has the ability to recoup that money.
Okay, so once they haven't paid this invoice, how many days do they have to pay that? 30 days?
They're given 30 days. We send a letter to let them know that they're going to be assessed. Sometimes some payments trickle in. Most of the time when we get to this point, they do not.
So then it goes to the DOR?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Deese?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, just to clarify that point is, it basically becomes a lien on their house. Is that correct? And so if they were to sell it, they would, wherever they sold it to, the escrow company would see that lien and then send it to the city, correct?
It gets attached to the property tax ID number. It's a separate line item. And then I've actually been watching some of the ones that we've previously assessed. And so when you pay your taxes twice a year, some of them, half of the bill has been paid already because they paid their taxes. So yeah, it lives with the property. So if they were to sell that property, it would have to be made whole, basically.
Okay, so it's at the DOR for the taxes, but also it's a lien on the property so that if it sells, then they have to pay it as well? Or do we not put a
I'm not sure if
county
it's
lien?
specifically a lien, but it's an assessment to their
Okay.
taxes.
Okay, all right. Mayor, another quick question.
Okay.
On this property, it's cleaned up, we spent the money, now they're paying for it. Do you expect this property you have to go back to this property in a few months and then have to clean it up again? As soon as you see something right away, will you go out there, spend the money on it, or do you have to renotice them and wait the time and then assess them?
This particular property, we did not get the 1-year abatement that you're referring to. This was done under court order. We went out there and cleaned it up in about 4 hours with the assistance of Public Works. So no, this one, we would have to start a case over again. However, there is currently a case started on it. And this time, if we do end up in court, it will be the 1-year abatement.
So anytime you have to go out there and clean it up, then there would be a new assessment that we would add through this process here.
Only to be maxed at 9,500. So in other words, each time we go out there, it's 9,500 for the year, for the life of the abatement order.
Oh, for the
that
life
year.
of the abatement
Yes,
order
I
for
had
the
to
year.
clarify that with legal. We can't go past the 9,500. So we don't reset the money clock every time. I had hoped that that would be the case, but it is not. So I did ask that question the other day because I knew this point would come up, because there will be properties in the future that we have the 1-year abatement order on, that I can guarantee you, other properties throughout the city that will come out of compliance almost immediately. And we
Okay.
will have to go back, but we need to keep an eye on those costs.
All right, thank you. More, just a quick note, that makes it more important that the bill that that Mike Yakowicz submitted comes off the table and gets passed, because that'll increase it to 25,000.
It really does.
Thank you.
Councilor Rowan?
I just want to follow up on the question from Councilmember Neese. Do we have, and I don't know, Andy or Karen, if you want to answer this, do we have the ability to create a mechanism by which the payment of the abatement would be accelerated at the time of transfer? So if there was a sale or if there was a foreclosure, the city would get paid before the property transferred?
I don't have an answer for that one. Andy?
Councilmember Owen, I believe it just functions like an SID assessment, so it'll be paid at the time of sale.
Paid in full?
Yes.
Okay, so it would not carry to a new property owner?
Well, I don't believe so. They may be able to negotiate that, but these are only for 1 year, so maximum it'll be 12 months.
So even if the property is foreclosed upon, the city is made whole?
Can I just comment
Yeah, maybe.
on it? Sure. It is a lien, so in theory, it could last for 100 years if every subsequent owner said, sure, I'll buy your property with a lien on it. But nobody does that, so they insist that it get covered or taken care of at the time of sale. And with a foreclosure, the bank is essentially buying their own property, and it's the same deal, but they would be stuck with it, the bank would be at that point.
So then the $9,500 clock essentially would open back up at the time of transfer?
Should, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Anything else before we proceed to a vote? Okay, so the vote is for approval of item 1-2. We had a public hearing, opened it, and didn't have any comment. So the motion is for approval with the condition that staff is authorized to adjust accounts or the numbers for subsequent payments. So if in favor of the motion, please, which I think is probably something should be part of our standard staff recommendation, because that issue could always come up, right? So my advice would be to bake that into the cake every time, so. All right, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Concludes item 2. Item 3 is the weed assessment. So Tony, would you read item 3?
Item number 3, public hearing and resolution assessing weed abatements. Staff recommends approval.
Back to Tina.
Okay, so this is for the year. We had a total of 1,594 cases this year, of which 189 were sent to parks. By the time parks got there, 29 were cut, so we were down to 160 that were cut by the Parks Department. We assessed 43 properties in September. We are now assessing 25 properties here in February. One was a last-minute payment that came in. There's actually a couple that came in. So I would ask that the same request from Andy be added to this one. We had an additional 355 come in and then another 177.50 on Friday. So our new total would be 5,055, give or take, depending on if more rolls in. I gave you the 2021 numbers because I know how much you like numbers, so that you could compare the amount of cases. And then I'm proud to say that our compliance rate, even though our cases went up by over 300, is up to 90% compliance.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions for Tina? Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, we got a letter late here from
We did. I got that at about 3 o'clock this afternoon.
is any good, bad, or indifferent with that? Can you explain, would that help or not?
Sure. Whenever we send out a weed notice or invoice, the person has an opportunity to come in and discuss it with me or basically try to negotiate with me. The issue with this one is they claim they went and cleaned it up, but I have photographs from before and after. So not only does my code officer take pictures that are date and time stamped, so does Parks. They take pictures with measuring implements to show. So the letter was sent, I have the file here. And I have some pictures too, if you care to look at those. So this letter was hand-delivered to, I believe, administration. It didn't get to me until it was forwarded, so I didn't get a chance to talk to this gentleman. So I don't know when exactly he took care of what he claims to have taken care of in this letter. Our letter was sent to him July 29th. Code officer went out August 16th to verify if anything had been done. New photographs were taken and nothing was changed. Parks Department went out on August 18th, and I have before and after pictures to show the work that they did. So, barring having the opportunity to speak with this gentleman, the assessment, in my opinion, would stand because Parks did do the work.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Tiswell and Councilmember Denise.
Tina, help me understand something really quick here. You got 160 cut by Parks, and we only assessed 68.
I'm sorry?
Big discrepancy. You had 160 properties cut by the Parks? Is that what I'm reading there?
Yes.
And then you only assessed 68. So tell me why that occurred.
We're only assessing because they did come in and pay. So they did pay the invoice. So those are the ones that have declined not to pay the invoice. That's why we're here.
Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a comment about what you were saying, if I understood and wrote the dates down kind of quickly. So code enforcement took the last photograph at 8:16. Parks was out there at 8:18, took another photograph before they cut. And just to clarify, that you compared the two pictures before they cut and then the last one that the code enforcement took, and they were exactly the same as far as height?
I can show you the pictures.
No, I'm just asking for your opinion.
So August 16th, there was code enforcement did their follow-up pictures. The cut was not done as asked, so we refer it to Parks. And on August 18th, they went out and before they cut, they do a whiteboard with the date and time and ruler. And then they take a picture afterwards to show that they've cut them.
Right, so the 18th picture matched what the code enforcement took on the 16th.
Matched?
Yeah, as far as length of grass.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
yes.
That's what I just wanted to clarify.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
I wasn't following that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, Council, I'm going to make the motion, try to address this last point we've been dealing with. So, oh, thank you. This is an item for public hearing. Is there any public comment on item 3? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Back to the motion, Council, my motion would be to approve item 1.3 with the exception or with the condition that staff is given the authorization to adjust the amounts shown on Exhibit A to reflect any of the more recent payments that have come in or might come in, and also to look at this letter that we got, and if staff concludes that there is a reason to remove that staff would be authorized to do that. Not to add anything to this, but to remove that if that was staff's judgment, on the chance what staff went out and cut the neighbor's property and got the wrong property, for example. I have no idea what it is, but that would be the motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Tricky? And discussion. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Denise?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the code enforcement does a great job, and they documented things well. I don't think they'll have to remove this, but I'll go along with that motion you made. I don't particularly like it. I think the case is here showing that he does owe it, and I would have left that up to code enforcement to determine that what should be on this list or not. So if they want to pay it and take it off, that would be one. I agree, but I'll support your motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. And item 4, Tony, would you read item 4?
Item number 4, public hearing and resolution approving and adopting FY 2023 budget amendments. Staff recommends approval.
Okay, Andy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have before you, I believe it's 5 budget amendments for FY23. I want to make a couple of corrections to the staff memo. The Budget and Finance Committee did meet on Friday, the 24th, and reviewed these budget amendments and recommended them for approval. That is contrary to what was put in the staff memo, as it was prior to that date that indicated otherwise. Additionally, I believe the budget amendment for the MDTs, or mobile data terminals, although I guessed at that, I assume that's what the D means. It indicated that the contract would have been on tonight's meeting, and that was not on your meeting. If you're paying close attention, that will be at, I believe, the 3/13 meeting. So, but just asking for budget approval at this point, not any contract approvals. I'll briefly go over the budget amendments. There was one for the parking department for $78,000 for repairs to an elevator that were unplanned. The transit department's asking for $1 million in their local match share. This is the tax-supported portion to fund the grant that was approved, I believe it was a month or two ago, for some electric buses. Police department is requesting $418,000 for the replacement of 40 mobile data terminals. These are the in-car computers, and this is funding that is set aside for this purpose. It was anticipated that the replacement would happen in FY24, though, hence the budget amendment moving that into this year. Parks department is asking for $110,000 for the purchase of 6 vehicles. This was related to a contract that was approved in January of this month. It's a combination of funding from Park District 1, as well as reestablishing some budget authority in the equipment replacement plan for funds that were intended to be used for vehicles in FY22 that did not get purchased. And then finally, there's one for $125,000 for the finance department to acquire tax and assessment software. I'll spend a little bit more time on this because it's the only one I really know about. But there's also because it's really neat. So we are working on a very old system on an old server, and we have an IT employee who will be very crucial in transitioning to new software, and she is intending to retire within the next 12 months. So it is important that we get moving on this project. We thought we had a solution in place we've been working on for a while. It's not going anywhere, and so we're asking that this be added to the finance department budget. I am additionally, if you look at the staff memo and the resolution, asking or recommending that you reduce $125,000 in the general fund, so it's net zero. It's moving from non-departmental to the finance department, and net zero to the general fund. The $125,000 was in the FY23 budget, anticipating some county election fees for a parks bond levy that 12 months ago I had assumed was going to be happening in the first half of the year, and so we budgeted some election dollars there. It does not look like we'll be needing those, so I'm asking that we use those for this purchase. That's the summary of the budget amendments. It is a public hearing, and I'll appreciate meeting with the committee on Friday, kind of last minute, so we could get that done and get information to them before bringing it to you guys today. So, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I assume council members got an email from me today summarizing our budget committee conversations. Huge appreciation to Andy and his staff for fielding our many questions about these. We did unanimously recommend all of these to council for approval tonight. There are good reasons behind them. The item that I neglected to include in my report, and I will send this separately by email, is we had also received an update on approval of council amendments to the FY23 budget, which is another thing that we want to track. The things that were adopted here at council, how are we doing? On many, we're doing quite well. There are some that are really concerning. There was unanimously allocated $75,000 for crime prevention. Very little has happened there. It appears that we're having a little bit of a struggle to fill the park planner position, which will need to get its attention. There are some other council amendments that are being implemented well. So I will send that in a separate email. I should have mentioned it tonight at council reports. Mayor neglected to do so. But as for these 5 that are before us tonight, I think well thought out, well reasoned amendments that we recommend for approval.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor.
Something there?
I have a question for Andy.
And then Councilmember Gill, go ahead. Councilmember Neese.
Andy, since you said the software is so neat and you know everything about it, I'm going to ask you some questions about it, because one of the things I think and maybe I don't know everything what the software has to do, but one of the things that we've talked about in the past is what are some of the other ways that we can create assessments? whether it's linear feet or, rooms, things like that, what the state allows us to do. Will this software capture the state data or the county data on the properties so that when assessments are created, you're able to better estimate if we create an assessment this way, this is what the amount would be versus this way. Will that software be able to do that?
Councilmember Neese, so we have identified a preferred software vendor. We have not gotten a contract, and that would be a future budget amendment. So I can't say definitively what this software will do. We are going to probably recommend that we use the same software that the county uses for calculating assessments and tracking, because we have to share information with them. Whatever software we end up with, we'll have to create files, transmit them over, and bring them back. With respect to ability to calculate assessments, I will say the more complex those become, the more challenging it is to find a software that can do that. In fact, our storm sewer assessment, for example, is a calculation of, it's a charge per square foot based upon I believe a zoning code. There's a lot of variables and a lot of tables.
Right.
And that's one of the holdups we've had trying to find a new software with this is we show that to some vendors and they say we'd have to completely modify this software to work for this methodology. So it's been a challenge, the complexity of some of those assessments. And I've been kind of encouraging in the background, hey, we should simplify this so we can find a software that'll work. So I can't guarantee that this would do that. I don't know that outside of a highly customized software that we'll be able to have complex assessment methodologies. With respect to the ability to have that information, we already do have that information. It's generally maintained by county/DOR. I'm not sure exactly who, but we're able to pull all that information and, we can do it manually, but that's, not an effective way to do it for the entire city. So if it's trying to generate scenarios based upon some assumptions, I think we can probably figure out how to do that, if that's what you're after.
Yeah, Mayor, a quick follow-up. I'll support this amendment, but I thought I heard you say you would prefer the council adopt policies that support the software, and I think that should be the other way around. I think that based upon what the council wants to do, the software should be able to support that, and then that's what we need to look for. So I'll support this amendment, but I think we really need to make sure that the software's capability is what the council would like to see done or what the city needs. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kulik, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Owen really laid out really well. Just wanted to add as a member of the Budget Committee that, we also discussed where the money was coming from for each of these items, and we're satisfied that staff had done a really good job of finding places, so it's not as though we're going over budget or something like that. So it's just bared repeating. But thank you, Councilmember Owen, for really excellent exposition of our discussion last week.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, we need a motion. You're right. I'm kind of 0 for 3, I think, on that. Yeah. Thank you very much. This is also a public hearing item. Is there anybody who would like to comment on item number 4, the 2023 budget amendments? Anybody like to comment? No one is coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing. I just have a perfect crystal ball, and I know whether there's going to be public comment. So, Councilmember Owen.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken public testimony, I move to adopt the FY 2023 budget amendments as recommended by staff and the Budget Committee.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette makes the second. Any further discussion? Okay, the motion is for approval of item number 4, consistent with the staff recommendation. If in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. And that concludes the regular agenda. Councilor Rowan?
I'm being asked by my colleague to ask a question.
I'll ask the question, Mayor. Can a reconsideration of a zone change include a change of the zone, or does the the applicant have to bring their zone change request back to the council through the zoning process if they were going to change the zoning?
We'll let our deputy city attorney answer that question, but my guess is we could not make the reconsideration conditioned on a change.
Okay,
They would have to come back for round two. Do you guys want to comment there? And
I think we share that opinion. My suggestion to you is that you consider taking a brief break so we can talk about what your options are and then decide if there is, because not answering your question, Councilmember Neese, I think the answer to your question is no, is what I'm understanding. But a question to reconsider the vote can, under Robert's rule, take place tonight, or it can take place at the next regular meeting. After that, it cannot. So I would, Karen and I have been chatting, I would suggest we just, at some point, before we gavel the night down, we take a brief break so I can kind of clarify for those who prevailed in the no, that if there's any reconsideration, you can do that, or nothing else needs to happen. I'd rather you have that clarity than pass it up tonight. So my suggestion is to take a break sometime before you gavel, so we can be very clear about what you, if there's any, what a reconsideration looks like under Robert's rules. Thank you.
okay, why don't we move ahead to public comment on non-agenda items, and then we will take a break and then come back, and we'll either adjourn or continue the discussion on that. So this is then public comment on non-agenda items. If anybody'd like to comment on anything that was not on our agenda tonight, please come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address.
Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. I have a letter here written from my counselor as to what living in our situation and the others that live like we do, what this is doing to the mental health of your community. So, according to Long Island Interventions, those who are under the influence of drugs have the increased likelihood of getting into conflicts with others, which can lead to increased stress on those around them. 1/3 of all violent crimes may be linked to substance issues, including theft and other property crimes. This impacts the community where substance users lives, because this is where all their crimes occur. The Organization of Human Services Education states that drugs such as methamphetamines provoke violent behavior due to increased paranoia and erratic states of mind. With persons living in a chronic state of fear, as is a person living in a community where this is chronic drug use and high traffic for drug dealing, there are significant mental and physical health consequences. A study by the University of Minnesota found that living in a chronic state of fear can lead to weakened immune systems. This can lead to cardiovascular damage and gastrological problems. From a mental health standpoint, chronic fear leads to increased stress hormones that cause the body to slow down functions that are not needed for immediate survival and to increase the flow of these hormones into the amygdala. This can lead to an increase in chronic anxiety. With this increase, this information for long-term memory can be impacted because the portion of the brain that allows this formulation to constantly stay in an alert state. Fear also interrupts the process of the brain that regulates emotional responses, reads nonverbal cues, and reflects before acting. This can have a detrimental impact on being able to form appropriate responses and actions to situations. Long-term consequences to living in chronic fear can also lead to chronic fatigue, depression, and PTSD. By living in close proximity to a home where there is known methamphetamine use and constant coming and going of people using and selling drugs, a person can be living in a constant state of fear. There are serious consequences to the physical and mental health for people who are living in this constant state of fear. These consequences will impact activities of daily living, including being able to function in family relationships and perform well at work or at school. Eventually, these consequences will impact your community as a whole when several members are no longer able to be productive due to living in chronic state of fear and stress. So I just wanted to read that to you because she wrote it for you guys. But at the same time, did you guys see the Billings article, Billings Gazette today? Murder in the Magic City, raising homicide rates, be the new normal? That should not be a normal.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Good evening. My name is David Phaedron. I live at 621 Nottingham Circle. And I'm here to speak to you today about something that means a great deal to me, personal privacy. As reported by KTVQ, our local police department is launching Project Eyes on the Block, which, quote, creates a resource of residents or business owners who agree to share their surveillance footage with the police department when a crime or incident occurs in the area, end quote. On the surface, involving members of the community in policing efforts is both a good and helpful practice. However, I fear the ramifications of implementing this policy for a number of reasons. First, it allows police officers to more easily obtain evidence against everyday citizens while circumventing the process of obtaining a warrant. I am a strong believer in the U.S. Constitution and its principles, especially the civil liberties outlined in the Bill of Rights. I am thankful for the First Amendment protecting our local news station's right to report on this new policy. I am thankful for the First Amendment protecting my right to be here speaking to you today. I am also thankful for the Fourth Amendment's right against unreasonable searches and seizures. I and the Founding Fathers believe that a criminal justice system is only as strong as its protection of the rights of the accused. Warrants are a necessary check on policing power by the judicial branch to better ensure the protection of citizens' civil liberties and privacy. This policy would give police far more sweeping power than is necessary to do their jobs at the risk of civil liberties enshrined in the Constitution. Second, the implementation of the program has the potential to evolve into a Fifth Amendment issue as well. Should someone walk out of their house at around the same time a crime happened to take place in the neighborhood, it could implicate them in crimes they did not commit. Should someone stumble out of their house or vehicle for any reason, police would have a compelling motive to question them for other crimes that, once again, they may not have committed. The policy, to be clear, does not specify which cameras should be used or how broad the scope of searching would be. The form on the department website requires participants to agree that they, quote, will be willing to assist in the retrieval of any surveillance that may have been captured, end quote. This clear violation of the Fifth Amendment creates a dangerous precedent for criminal justice and civil liberties. Third, it creates an atmosphere of unease among Billings citizens. I am not a criminal and don't have anything to hide, but I still don't like the idea of a governing body having access to video files of me simply trying to live my private life. With cameras of all kinds being so ubiquitous in our current world, I am already uneasy about tech companies tracking my every move. To know that any business or any resident that has a video camera can now grant police access to video recordings of me or anyone if the police suspect any form of wrongdoing sets a dangerous precedent. This is not even mentioning the potential issue of landlords participating in this program without their tenants' consent, essentially waiving their tenants' Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. The skepticism our founding fathers had towards government power should not be extended to everyday citizens. For these reasons, I urge the council to reconsider Project Eyes on the Block or to table the program until more public comment or legal analysis is given. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, here. Like what he said. Mayor, Council, Ed, how you doing? Michelle, how you doing? Wesley Dunn, opclearinghouse at gmail.com, Dorothy Lane, Ward 1. Heights, Montana. It was nice to see a fellow defender up here at the podium in front of the cameras defending some of these same principles we've been speaking on last week. That was good. I'd like to get back onto one of the original topics we started this with. When I say we, I mean my wife, daughter, Jackie, Sean, and their children. That topic is endangering children. There are children in my home and also Jackie's. The innocent souls that live off of Dorothy Lane. What about all those children? I myself, an adult, along with all the other adult law-abiding citizens, can fairly defend ourselves. The rule states for children, though, no knives, no pepper spray, no weapons of any kind. I do not advocate on our children carrying weapons around, but I do advocate for children's safety. You cannot have children's safety when you let known drug houses, known prostitution rings, and known theft rings to go on operating within the city with no repercussions. I'm saddened to report yet another event in which my daughter and my wife witnessed. Real quick, what happened was apparently a boyfriend or husband came over to Roberts wanting to get his girlfriend or wife from his house. She did not want to leave. An argument ensued. He tried to grab her. He pulled out of the driveway, and then by the head of her hair threw her out of the vehicle while she was trying to get out herself. So she was halfway in the vehicle. And then when she did that, she slipped on a nice big block of ice that was in the front of our street. I heard it on camera. It hurt bad. My wife witnessed all this. My daughter witnessed all this. So she called the police just to see if she needed an ambulance because she looked like she was hurt. Well, while my wife was talking to the police, nice lady and gentleman, this lady comes out of Robert's house and starts to go. Well, the officers want to talk to her. She don't want nothing to do with officers. She gets in a stolen vehicle, which was owned by a student at Skyview that which now is found. That's good. And she drives right past the cops. Like she care less, lights flashing and everything because the truck was stolen. You know, she had to jiggy rig the extension or something. You know. Well, anyways, they wind up catching her. So, unfortunately, this thief, drug addict, Bailey Victoria French, was caught and arrested on multiple charges, including possession of dangerous drugs. It made my heart happy to know we could help a Skyview High School student get his truck found. Can you only imagine the mental state of that student after being stolen, having his truck stolen from? Can y'all imagine that? It's terrible what's going on right now in the city of Billings. And we're just up here trying to make a change, trying to get somebody to listen to us. All we know is to start with council. We know that the judges, it gets to there. But, guys, y'all have influence on a lot of people, you know. And this right here we got to make a change. Thank you for the task force. You're welcome, Billings. You would have never done that 6 years ago if it wasn't for myself, my wife, Jackie, and Sean. So you're welcome, Billings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for calling the police. Further comments?
Sean Seedhouse, 104 North Broadway. Mayor, council, city staff. Really, I'm just here to, I guess, acknowledge to you that in the meetings that I've partaken in, I've come to realize how the breadth and the depth of what you guys cover is immense. And I feel like you get a lot of complaints and criticism, and very rarely do you get a thank you. And so really, I'm just here to say thank you collectively for the effort you put forward. 2 weeks ago in passing the rec center master plan. And I look forward to the challenge of the next steps with that. And really just wanted to, on record, tell you collectively that people notice and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying thank you. Any other comment on items not on our agenda this evening? Okay, we'll close that public comment period. Council will take a break, and we'll come back, and we'll either just adjourn, or are there going to be any council initiatives this evening? Maybe. Okay. All right. We'll address that. Maybe. Okay. So we're adjourned. It is 20 after 7. Let's come back before 7:30. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will deal with council initiatives. Do we have any further clarity, Councilmember Tricky, on whether there's a council initiative here or not?
I just wanted to bring up two things. One, I'm looking into seeing at the city of Billings. I'm looking at two things right now. One is taking a look at whether or not the city of Billings can participate in the Big Sky Rail project, which is what would be the Amtrak line cutting across the southern path. All the other counties in the state that it's touching have signed up. Ours is the only one that has not. So anyway, I'm looking into that, and we'll bring something forward soon. And Councilmember Rupsis brought up whether or not we wanted to have a conversation about the recent Gazette articles. Basically, I think the quote that caught everyone's attention is the police department basically saying, after 3 years of this, we're getting to a point where that's just the new normal. I don't know. Do we want to talk about that more tonight or not? Because I know you guys talked a lot about it 2 weeks ago, or last week.
Yeah, I'm very confident none of us want that to be the new normal, but I'm not quite sure what we do about it right now. Councilor Rupsis, that you did bring that up. Is there something you want to comment on further?
Not really, other than to just let everybody know that no, we do not. I don't think anybody up here wants that to be the new normal, or even to start thinking like that. So my guess is that some of the nuance of the conversation, the interview was lost in translation, as happens sometimes in the media. So, but I wanted to give Chris or anybody else a chance to address that.
Frankly, can't say it any better. I have not had a conversation pertaining to that interview, but I can say unequivocally in the 4 years that I've been working here, working with the police department, working with elected officials, working with this organization, the whole point has been not to accept what we've been going through the last 3 or 4 years as any kind of acceptable level relative to violent crime and criminal activity. So I've never had anyone inside this organization or on this elected body argue against that commitment and desire and unwillingness to accept what we've been experiencing as any kind of a new normal.
Okay, thank you. Back to Councilor Tricky.
Yeah, I will just say one thing, that from a police perspective, there really is only so much you can do about crime. The problem isn't what's going on with the courts or the police. The problem is what's going on and all the other supporting things that we have in place. We do not have enough parole officers. Mental health has been seriously underfunded for decades. I sat with Lisa Harmon over at First Church on Sunday afternoon, and the people that were sitting there, who are, the evening residents of the place, were there that afternoon, and some of them were that afternoon, and it could not be more obvious to me that if we want these people off the streets, we have to figure out how to help people who cannot make it in what we consider to be normal society. I asked Sheriff Linder in 2018 when he was running for sheriff, what do we do at the state legislature? And he said unequivocally, fund mental health. So there is there's a little bit that we can do here, and that's one of the reasons why I've been pushing the domestic violence, family violence, education initiative stuff. But, the real problem is in how we're not funding the necessary programs that are being run at the state level, jails, parole, on and on and on.
Okay, doesn't sound like there's going to be an actual initiative. That is what it's on our agenda, so I think we need to be careful to go too far afield from our agenda. The next item up is going to be adjournment unless there was something that came out of the break. There was some discussion about that. Councilmember Rupsis?
actually, if with council's indulgence for just a second. We missed this during council courtesies and then during administrators' reports earlier, but tomorrow, I believe, is Michael Whitaker's last day as the director of the Parks Department. We wanted to recognize him. He was here. We just missed that he was sitting here, and he should have been recognized while he was here to receive our appreciation. When Mike came in, it was shortly after the ballot initiative to build Dealer Park was passed. He got Dealer Park built. We implemented PD1 over the course of the time, and we've done everything from replacing playgrounds at North Park and South Park to the slides at Rose Park Pool and everything all over the city. And certainly, we're in much better position today than we were 16 years ago. And we owe some gratitude to Michael Whitaker for his leadership in the Parks Department, and wish him a great retirement.
Thank you for addressing that. I didn't see Mike in the audience, so I'm glad you did. Very good. And I don't know if there's any sort of internal outgoing party, but Chris can let us know that when the meeting is over, if there is. Okay, anything else, council? Was there back, Councilmember Boyette?
After discussion, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider item 1T, so we can have discussion.
Okay, the motion is for reconsideration of item 1T. And just to clarify the procedural issue here, if the motion to reconsider were to pass, all that would do is put it on a future agenda for another vote. And I think by our rules, the mayor has the ability to determine the when of that, but I would assume sooner is better than later but that would be conditioned on this motion passing. It was brought by somebody who voted with the majority there, or the prevailing party, not the majority of the prevailing party. So that seems to be in order. Have I stated that correctly, Karen?
Mayor, it is stated correctly. I do not think that you're limited to having to put the matter onto the next regular session. If the motion to reconsider were to pass by a majority vote tonight, it could be reconsidered tonight. If you want to put it on a future agenda, it would need to be on the very next city council regular meeting.
Is that up to the mayor's discretion?
It would be up to his discretion.
Okay, if there's discussion, I just ask that council, you address the timing issue. If the motion is to pass, what your preference is there. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you. So even if it were moved to a future session, nothing changes in the zone change. It is as it is now. There's nothing that would change.
What the vote is tonight. So it has not passed by a supermajority, which is required under our zoning code. Gotcha. So it stays in place. The council, if the motion to reconsider was passed, then you go back to the four options that are before the council, which the council shall either approve the application, deny the application, allow withdrawal of the application, or delay the application for a period not to exceed 30 calendar days. So if the motion to reconsider does pass, you go back to any of those four options.
I guess, Mayor, if I could ask.
Please.
So just to clarify, because the agents are here, is that if they were voted to go ahead and reconsider, but to delay it, because then you have those four options. If the applicant wanted to withdraw, they've got 4 months to come back. And then, but within that 4 months, can they change any part of the zone change? And then on the fourth one, the fourth option was to, what was the fourth option?
It says to delay the application for a period not to exceed 30 calendar days.
Okay, so within that period of time, they also cannot change anything in that application. Is that correct?
On 4, it would be the same application that came out of the zoning
Correct.
commission.
But 3,
The withdrawal, then it could go back to the zoning commission.
and change whatever's.
Correct.
It's almost a new application.
And the way that I am interpreting this, that if the council did have a motion to reconsider that did pass and then did allow for the withdrawal of the application, it would not be required to be withdrawn tonight.
Karen, would you just say that one more time? I want to
Okay.
make sure I was tracking you.
So the way that I'm reading our code, the city council, if there is a motion to reconsider that passes by a majority vote, then the city council would have the option to approve, deny, allow withdrawal of the application, or delay the application for a period not to exceed 30 calendar days. Of course, you have to decide whether or not you're going to make that decision, assuming the motion to reconsider passes tonight or at the next regular business meeting. So you've got a couple of hurdles. First, do you want to go ahead and do the motion to reconsider? If it passes, take it up again tonight or take it up in 2 weeks. And then at that point, you would have those 4 options to select from.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ripsis, you were trying to get your hand up?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I don't know, do we have any insight if this passes? I might be agreeable to reopening the discussion if the developer is looking to withdraw. But do you have any insight into whether or not they are looking to do that?
I don't have that insight.
Councilmember Ripsis, would you like to ask that question of the developer's representative?
Mr. Luthold, would you like to address that?
Yes, if that's acceptable to the council. Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. The question that you put before me tonight is whether we would request a withdrawal. And I need to say just a couple of things about that because we were here a year ago and we heard that there was concern that we listened to the neighbors because the access to Bell Avenue was unacceptable. And so we withdrew and stepped away for almost 6 months at that time and repackaged it, added clarity, additional buffers over what the zoning code requests, clarified the public park, and to all accounts have created a appropriate or a better received, I guess let me use that term, better received land use package that we brought back. When we brought that back in, acknowledging that the local neighbors did not want to have access, we provided that with a variance and submitted that, which staff soundly opposed. And so we spent then several weeks talking with staff about how best to bring this forward. We recognize that that did not meet the code as it is, and that pedestrian and vehicular connectivity is important. But we also recognize that it's up to this body to make the final decisions on what's appropriate for those approvals and what's in your code and what you support. So working with staff, we brought forward a document which addressed the land use and the changes that were requested at that time and gave both options to this council to approve. Either one that had connectivity and was clearly in compliance with the zoning code and in my opinion and in staff's opinion and others who have looked at it from a legal standpoint meet all the requirements of the code. We don't believe that there are deficiencies in that package that has connectivity. We then provided the one that has no access to Bell Avenue or to Obie Lane because that's what we'd heard from the neighbors. Recognizing that that was necessary to carry forward in non-compliance, we provided a variance to go with that and brought those both forward to the council for your consideration, recognizing that that decision would eventually lie with you folks. And so my answer to that would be, I'm not sure what we would change if we withdrew. And a withdrawal, to Councilmember Harrington's comment, is not just 4 months. That is a full redesign. That is a full resubmittal back to staff through the City Zoning Commission, public hearings, notifications, and it brings it back to you here. And so as I look at what we did 2 weeks ago, and I actually had a nice meeting with Toby Erickson this afternoon about how we can help mitigate traffic issues on Bell Avenue and the like, working with the neighbors, and actually working with the folks on Obie Lane about how they may be able to deal with their access issue. But, so we were making progress and process forward there. So I am really struggling. If I meet the code and that's not approvable, and if I don't meet the code and ask for the variance and that's not approvable, I don't know, Councilmember Rupsis, what I would do with a withdrawal and take it back. And Councilmember Niece's comments about commercial aspects, again, in a collaborative format, whether it's a future work session or council retreat or whatever, we are told very specifically from staff, and it's codified in the code, that we are trying to avoid strip commercial along principal arterials. That's why we went to nodal types of development. We don't want 24th Street. We don't want Grand Avenue any longer. And so we do not promote. That's why you go across Bannister Drain to go to the Starbucks that's going to be built there. That's in the commercial development that circulates around King and Shiloh in a node the size that staff has identified and put in the code. So I understand Councilmember Niece's comments about why don't we put some commercial there, but remember, commercial, if you don't have enough rooftops, will drive more traffic to the neighborhood and would be counterproductive to what we've heard from the neighbors. So again, I want to communicate that because we don't have much opportunity to do that. And I think that's an important foundational aspect of the decisions that are being made here tonight. So again, I would not withdraw because I'm not sure what I would bring back, Councilmember Rupsis. And would say, I ask for the leadership and decisions of this council in regard to that. Otherwise, we will have to fall back and look at our other options with regard to proceeding in response to your action here this evening.
Mr. Luther, let me ask a related but slightly different question. You made it very clear you were not interested in withdrawal. Another option is delay up to 30 days. That's our right to do that. I don't know that by agreement we would have the right to go beyond 30 days, but that'd be an interesting legal question. But assuming that we operated within the 30 days, the first reading approval included language directing staff in the annexation agreement to work with the developer and your firm to look at traffic calming options on Bell, on Obie, widening, whatever. This would not be the degree of change that some council members might be looking for. I acknowledge that. But at least if you had that additional 30 days, would you be able to put flesh on that skeleton concept, and maybe you've already started working on that, and come back with pretty pictures, drawings, concepts that we could look at, staff could look at, neighbors could look at, would not eliminate neighbor opposition, I'm sure, but might soften it and also might be relevant to this council. So that's the question. If you had the 30 days, what would you do with it?
Thank you very much, Mayor Cole and members of the council. Actually, that was part of my meeting with Toby Erickson, one of the local neighbors who was asking those questions today when he came. We sat down with the diagram and we talked about what I thought we could do and couldn't do. Now, obviously, I have not presented that to city engineering staff and talked about it, but we talked about, and again, we're treading on territory here when we approved, and this would be again a legal question and a planning department question, is when we approved parts of the zone change annexation and variance, and we talk about the fact that, so we have an approval in place right now that's subject to a second reading. And the access points, Obie Lane is obviously a given access point. The access on Bell Avenue we showed in concept. And the way the zoning code reads is it talks about these rights of way and access as being essentially where they're at, because you and planning staff, Wyatt, and engineering is looking at how traffic will move through that long term. And what I talked with Mr. Erickson about was possibly shifting that access east or west on Bell Avenue to eliminate some of the continuity of those drives. So that would be something that we would ask for consideration if we're going to move that. That would help from a traffic calming standpoint. In addition to the changes in the annexation agreement, we are agreeable to widening the road and taking into account, making that a full width road. I also explained to Mr. Erickson that we as the developers will rebuild the intersection at Shiloh Road. We will probably end up having to acquire a sight vision triangle from an adjacent neighbor to take care of that bike path that's there. In order to address the safety concerns there, I talked about a couple of, you heard Max and I talk about on the Brewington project, some bulb outs for crossings. I'd like to try and get 2 bulb outs with crossings and speed cables, speed humps, between where our access comes out onto Bell Avenue and Shiloh Road. Because as you heard Debbie Melling talk last night, the intent is to come further west on Bell and circulate back up to Central Avenue. So if we can move that over, our access over to the west, for instance, the western side of the property is what I proposed to Mr. Erickson. And put 2 speed humps and traffic calming devices and take care of the safety issues that are out there right now. I think that's a doable deal for engineering and betterment for the community, for that particular location in the community. That, Mayor Cole, I could have ready for you
It's the second slide.
here first the next week and have it in a package so that we can talk about this at the next council meeting, should you decide. It wouldn't take 30 days to put together a concept drawing that shows that. Obviously, you know, that's subject to some discussion with planning and some discussion with engineering, but those are the kinds of things that I've contemplated in order to address and deal with the comments that have come up from yourself and from council.
Okay, thank you. Other questions while we've got Rick here, or not? I don't see. Don't go away.
Thank you very much.
And we know you won't. Further discussion by the council. Again, we don't have a motion on, actually, we do have a motion. I apologize. We do have a motion on the floor. So discussion on the motion, which is for reconsideration. Councilmember Gulick and then Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. You know, I think the design that was brought forward is a very good design. I think, you know, probably the first place that everybody in the community would agree on to having more of this type of housing would be downtown. But I think we can have good walkable places, other parts of town, and that they should be able to have that kind of place. It's just an incredible investment of time and funds to put together a proposal like this. And especially when they did this a year ago. I mean, we're talking many tens of thousands. I don't know, it could be getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I feel like the response we have was just a little too flip. I fear that developer, it'd be crazy as a developer to bring this forward if, before this council, if you don't have some good idea. I mean, they've followed the zoning ordinances. We need housing in our community. We need developers to do that housing. I think we're seriously at risk of driving any sane developer out of town. And for those of us who voted against the zone change, I guess I'd like to hear from you, what does it take to get to yes? I think we want to be a community that's looking for yes. And so what is it going to take? That could help us so that they're not just guessing. It's an incredible guessing game they're doing. It's a high risk, high stakes thing. So I'd love to hear from council members who voted against the zone change.
Okay, that's your option, council. Councilor Joy, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Mr. Lithold already told us, those of you who have looked at the West End plan, it is not to look like Grand Avenue in Midtown. That is the whole point of the West End plan. It was to develop differently so that you didn't have 3 miles of businesses right next to each other, very shallow lots with household or residential right behind it. It was specifically not to look like that. It was to have business nodes. And when we came up to a zone change, when I was first on council, and it was a business that wanted to go in that was not used by right. And we had a very long discussion with this chamber filled all the way front to back and out into the hallway of people who were for or against it. We talked about this very issue, that it's not to look like Grand Avenue. It is to be nodes. So I would also like to say I appreciate the developer talking about putting in traffic calming, tables, bulb outs, traffic calming. I can tell you that in Ward 3, there is another development that has all of those things, and people still complain about traffic. It is something that is prevalent. It's very common. People are very concerned about it. The table lift, I'm telling you, I've driven down that subdivision street. You cannot go that fast down that street. It has tables and bulb outs. I mean, you've just squeezed the traffic down, and still people are complaining about that. So what are we expecting? What are we expecting? We all drive cars. Everyone who came to this chamber, except one, drove a car. So what expectation are we putting on him to fix this problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilor Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Gulick, you're absolutely right. I appreciate the concessions or the changes that the developer has made over the time, and it is better than it was a year ago, so without a doubt. And I said as much last week. I think, to me, if they had come back and the entire northern half of that property was NX2, 4-plexes, 6-plexes, 8-plexes, with, narrow streets and little nice walkable areas, and I think I'd be hard pressed to vote against it, even with all the NX3 on the southern half. All I hear about constantly on the West End is we got to do something other than 4-story apartment complexes. Constantly I hear that. I think it's hard to tell from the drawing, but it seems like there's a lot of wasted space in those NX3s because you're building these huge buildings and then you have to build parking lots. And we could be much more efficient and probably not lose all that many units if we were building 4, 6, 8-plexes in something that has more of a neighborhood feel and isn't destroying the look and the character of the area. So, based on what I'm hearing from people in my area on what we want, I don't think it's more 4-story apartment complexes. I tried suggesting that if there was a way that we could work with the developer before they brought it forward, as part of these concessions with the traffic calming and those kinds of things, if they could say, you know what, okay, on the northern half of the lot, we'll do 3 stories. But we weren't allowed to do that. I think it's something I hear over and over and over again because of that area, that specific area where we're putting lots of maximum density units in areas where it's not, I'm sorry, it's not walkable to much of anything. It's just not. The distance from the southeast corner of this lot to the northwest corner of Shiloh Crossing, where Rio Sabinas is 1.3 miles. 1.3 miles from Sky Point gets you to Cecil Hall at MSUB. How many people are walking that? It's not. It's not a walkable area. It's not designed to be. Now, I think we can get there over time, maybe, if we completely redevelop what our expectations of commercial density looks like. We got a letter from Rocky Vista University. It's a beautiful facility, but if they really believed that people were going to walk from the apartment complexes right around it to Rocky Vista, they wouldn't have 400 parking spaces there for 300 students. It's not designed as a walkable area. And so for me, I think we need to change about how we're thinking about this. We as a council, I said this last week with Councilmember Shaw's comments, we have to find a way to put policy in place that equalizes the risk and the cost of building these types of developments where we actually want them. And that's going to be hard to do. But right now, it doesn't matter what, honestly, the West End plan that was drawn up 20 years ago that said we want all the commercial in the nodes and the houses elsewhere, we know now that's not a great development concept. We can be smarter now than we were 20 years ago and not continue this pattern. So I hope that kind of answered your inquiry about, what it would take to get me to yes. I would have had one of those hold my nose votes if the northern half was all NX2 and the southern half was NX3. But I prefer to just not see more 4-story apartment buildings with big parking lots around them in this area of town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further comments? Councilmember Owen?
I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. I would hope that we do have a vote tonight on reconsideration. I would hope that that vote passes, and I would hope that council members think really carefully about this vote. I think when we talk about what we want, we have to think really carefully about who the we is. We have a housing system in this community. There are we's all over this community who are experiencing massive constraints in housing. And so if we, the neighbors, don't want it, that's something council should consider and take into account. But there's all sorts of we's all over the community who desperately need housing, who are impacted by a project like this that loosens up the market, creates more options, and creates more alternatives. So I respect neighborhood. I appreciate the people who've come tonight and previously to speak before and against, but a project of this scale has a community-wide impact, not just a neighborhood impact. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind, not only because a project like this makes an impact on the entire community, but the signals that we send have an impact on the entire community. I am anxious about how the Billings bypass develops. I want that to develop in a certain thriving way, and I recognize that's going to mean density. My fear is it will be storage spaces and nothingness, and we will miss the opportunity to have innovative projects that bring services and amenities. And I'm concerned that developers will just simply say, it's easier for me to develop in another city than Billings. And certainly that they will say it's easier to develop in the county, even when we can't get the density we want. So I would just urge council members tonight to think about who the we is that we're acting on behalf of. I don't believe that business people are inclined to invest millions of dollars on a hunch. There's a demand for this. There's a we that needs this, and that's why they believe it's a project that makes sense that they brought to council tonight, because people will rent these apartments and they need these apartments. And so I would hope we vote tonight, and I would hope that those votes prevail. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Purington.
Thank you. I agree with that. I agree with the Councilmember Gulick. I really appreciate those comments. The one piece that I feel like we haven't talked about in this context is what the state legislature is trying to do to local control over zoning issues. And this kind of vote is exactly why they're trying to do it. I think this is going to add ammunition to the fire, and we're going to see a lot of local control stripped away if we continue to make these kinds of decisions that are out of line with what our zoning code is. We've already established that, we've adopted that, we've put that out into the community. I understand where you're coming from, but I think the place to have that conversation is, this is how we need to change the zoning code. And that's when we do it, not as these individual projects come up. I've always been really troubled by that, so I would push back and just say, I'm more than happy to have that conversation, but let's have it at a table where we can make a decision that will impact our development community into the future, and they can make some decisions with surety. And so I just want to put in that plug that the state legislature is proposed a number of bills that would dramatically reduce our ability to make these kinds of decisions at this table, would take it completely out of council's hands, make these processes administrative. Whatever people think about that, this is the reason why all of those bills are coming up right now. So I agree that I hope that we can reconsider this. Thank you.
Councilmember Purington?
Thank you. I too would ask the council to vote for reconsideration on this and then do a pass on it. I think we, as in our individual lives, we don't understand the risk that developers take. I agree, they're not going to invest millions of dollars if they don't have a good idea that it's going to work. I think these developers have done a good job of trying to meet the needs of the neighborhood as well as meet the needs from the requirements from planning. So, and when it comes down to the commercial, and this, to me, as I look at this, and I agree, we've been talking about doing these growth policies and the neighborhood plans, and we never have enough money or whatever it is. But I think this is where it's going to truly impact us, because the West End is prime for development. So whenever you say, well, there's no commercial out there, they can't walk to it or whatever, I think at this point, this is just, it's the beginning of a development in this area. Because now you've got the school, you've got St. Vincent's developing out there as well. You've got a mall right there. I think it's just prime for development, for commercial development. So whenever you now have the residential out there and some of it's already been developed, I think this will be a nice addition to that. And I think the commercial will come. So I think if we didn't vote for this, or if certain council members didn't vote for this, I think that would put the squash on a lot of future development.
Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is, where is the commercial going to go? We've got P1, P2 already zoned. We have the PUD, which is, we heard there's a Starbucks going in, I'm assuming Lot 1 or whatever that is. We got this college across the street from it, I believe. The only other thing is out there is the county land that when it comes in, I suppose if it's commercial, it would be, have to be zoned commercial. That would be the only area that I could see being commercial. And again, I think as Councilmember Shaw mentioned, this is the time to talk about this is during zoning. That's our only time is during zoning change to talk about these zone changes. And so in the future, if the state passes the law, we'll talk about zone changes throughout the entire city. And this would be one of those areas we would say, well, that area next to it is going to be commercial. And that's what the city would say. And the developer then would have to build commercial there at some point in the future. So I think I'd like to hear from Wyeth, if you know, where is the commercial around this place that's really walkable? And 1.3 miles is not walkable for most people to go to different commercials. It's drivable. They can sure drive there, but I'd like to hear where the walkable commercial is around this.
I want to make something really clear about the planned neighborhood development process, and that's what this was. The developers, we have a whole menu in our zoning code, and you get to choose the different types of planned neighborhood development, like the combinations of what you're going to propose for your specific application. And you don't have to have commercial in all of them. You don't have to. You get to choose. And that's what happened here. They chose a combination of multiple types of residential development, which you do have to choose. It's not one district anymore, which is what the whole point of this entire planned neighborhood development process was to not have it be one, but it can be multiple types of residential. And then there are options where you can do mixed use, where you can have commercial. So first of all, there was no requirement that there be commercial in this planned neighborhood development in this location. So just want to make sure that's really clear, that that's not an oversight or something that got missed. That was perfectly legitimate for what was proposed for this application. So the other part of that is that you've got residential in this area, and then as has been discussed extensively, you have the commercial that's developing just to the south, the different types of commercial, coffee shop, stores, retail, and then as Councilmember Roops has pointed out, the restaurants further down. Some of that's potentially walkable, depends on who you are and how far you're walking and what your decisions are. And some of it, people are going to drive, of course, as well. So I would say that you have a mix of options there, and depending on your preference and how far you want to walk or how far you're going to ride your bike or whatnot, then you could get to a variety of those commercial the services down there. There's still commercial in Lenhart Square that hasn't been built out yet as well. That's going to have actually a mix. It's going to have residential and commercial down south of the apartment buildings that are just being built to the south there. So that still has to develop as well. So there's a lot of things going on in this area. I think you're going to see over time a lot of choices. And yeah, you're going to have people who are going to walk and ride their bikes like they're doing out there right now, and you're going to have people who are still going to drive. So it's going to be a mix. But there's a lot of different services in a relatively close proximity to this. So that's, I guess, what I can add.
Okay. And I'll just comment there, most neighbors really hate commercial. If you think they don't like four-story, try putting commercial in there. That's just I didn't hear people coming forward saying we need, more traffic and more commerce, even though I think it'd be great. I mean, it'd be nice to have those facilities mixed into the neighborhood, but I'm not sure that's what the neighborhood wants. I'll just make a point. Although I think we've heard from our city attorney, and it makes sense, that we could not condition this reconsideration or vote to reconsider, then come back and come up with a bunch of conditions and impose them on the developer. My personal view is that there's nothing that prevents the developer from agreeing with the city to do something different. If we change the zoning to look like this, the zoning looks like that. So they would have to stay within the zoning. But if there was a less dense use in an Annex 3 zone, for example, they could just do that. I'm not sure exactly what else is allowed in an Annex 3. And I guess I'll ask that question to Wyeth or Karen or anybody, or maybe our Sanderson Stewart agents. And they're not going to commit to that tonight, but I'm just saying that that's a theoretical possibility. Now, the city would still like to have some assurance that that's what they were going to do, as opposed to the most dense option. But we have an annexation agreement out there, and the annexation agreement says that all of this is conditioned on the property actually being in the city. Remember, this isn't in the city yet. And we could, at least in theory, agree in the annexation agreement that even though this says Annex 3 there, or, whatever, that there's going to be a road here or a road there or this particular use. And I don't want to create any impression, though, that we are forcing the developer. Because what's the difference between forcing the developer and imposing a condition? It would truly have to be a voluntary agreement between the parties, and the developer would have to sign in blood in the annexation agreement saying this is truly voluntary. We really believe this. We really think this. We don't feel like we're under coercion to make this happen. We would want to insist on those sorts of representations in the annexation agreement. But I just throw that possibility out in case council members want to comment, city attorney wants to comment, the developer wants to comment, whatever. But working out those sorts of agreements would require some time. And even though we might vote for reconsideration tonight, I don't see any reason to move to an ultimate vote on the merits unless some council member's telling me they're prepared to change their vote. Otherwise, you're just doing the same thing, right? And I haven't heard that. But if somebody wants to clarify that for me, then let me know. So those are my comments. Councilmember Dees?
Yeah, I think when I listened to Mike, and if I paraphrase you wrong, please correct me, and he didn't like the variance and the amount of traffic that was going to be on there. And you've heard mine, I didn't like the fact there's really no commercial there. Although I'm hearing there's more commercial on the southern side, I'm not so sure I buy that, but I don't know that. That's what I hear. So, and I think Councilmember Rupsis, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but commercial was not such a big issue to you, but it was the NX2 and the N1, I think it's up there. It was not dense enough, if I understood that correctly. Dan, I'm not sure where you are on that, but I think we all, I think, have a little bit different reasons of why we're voting so hard against this project. My concern again is commercial. If this project, and I feel for what the agent's going through and the property owner, we like Denise Joy says, or Councilman Joy always says, we don't build houses. And we do need houses. And so I'm willing to put aside my stickler for commercial in this if it comes back for reconsideration, because I think that we need to move forward with housing, but I would like to see us really make sure there's some type of commercial in these future developments. And hopefully developers get the idea that we need to, whether they are housing developer and not build commercial, just leave the space there for a commercial developer or something, or building some type of ability for that better walkability nodes. This is not perfect, but maybe the project that builds next to it will make it better. And that's the only thing we as a council have to be able to make sure that we're setting that policy and the message to the developers to build things that are a little bit more developer. I agree, I don't want a Grand Avenue with commercial all the way down. That's not the way to build. And so the first section of this with the church there, that's definitely not, or the P2, that's definitely not Grand Avenue. That break up there right along, and then the school across the street. And so there's some already breaking up on that. And then now we're going to residential. I think it's time for more commercial there, but I'll let the developers develop that in the future. With that, I think we should ask a question on the, but I won't call for the question, but I think we should move to a vote.
No, I agree. That's a critical thing. Are we getting ready to vote on the, okay, this will be just any other debate on the motion for reconsideration? Okay, can you give me some clarity if this passes? Council, did you want to move to a vote tonight on the merits again, or wait? Is there anybody who's planning to actually change their vote? Okay. All right, then the motion then is just for consideration. And if in favor of the motion for reconsideration, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Voting in opposition, council members is Councilmember Rupsis. All others in favor. Now back to the council on the merits of the zone change. And again, the first reading was for approval with some conditions. I can't cite them chapter and verse exactly as to instructing staff to work on the traffic calming and things like that. But the assumption here on second reading is that unless the council says otherwise, we would be approving again what was approved in the first go-round. In item 1T, yes. Is there a motion? Councilmember Owen.
I move to approve the second and final reading ordinance for zone change 1021 located south of Bell Avenue and north of Rocky Vista Way.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Purington on the second, Councilmember Owen on the motion for approval on second reading. Any further discussion? Okay. If in favor of the motion on the merits for approval of second reading on item 1T, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Nay. Voting in opposition are council members Boyette, Tidswell, and Rupsis. All other council members voted in favor, correct? Correct. So the vote was 7-4, or I'm sorry, 8-4, and the 8-4. No, I'm sorry, 8 for the motion. That's, oh, yeah. And 3 against the motion. Yeah, I was kind of wondering, what's the matter with that? Okay. Okay, well, that means it passed on second reading. So, thank you guys for your efforts there. And very good discussion for the next go-round. And I'm going to tell us we can all go home and we're adjourned, unless there's anything. Okay, we're adjourned.